I see. काय के प्रोफेसर हैं वो?
फिजियोलॉजी,
Physiology. Wonderful. Wonderful.
कॉलेज भी
Great.
चालू था.
हाँ, so lot of work. Great. हाँ, सुभाष जी, आप भी बता रहे थे, आप कहाँ पे? इंदौर से हैं? अगर आप अनम्यूट कर सकते हैं तो great. We'll spend a few more minutes and then get started. We also have Nishi Jain and several others are joining in. So Yogan Bhai, Jai Jain, welcome as people are coming in. So shall we start? अपन जैसे हर दफे शुरू करते हैं, अपन नमोकार मंत्र से शुरू करते हैं. Yogan Bhai, would you lead us through a relaxing meditative Namokar mantra?
Jai Jain, everybody. So nice to have the folks here the day after the Das Lakshan. So let's start. First, close your eyes, please. Keep your back straight. Take a nice deep breath. Inhale. Hold. And slowly exhale. Make sure there's a smile on your face. Relax. And let's do one Namokar mantra together. Om Namo Ariyantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Aidiyanam, Namo Vachayanam, Namo Lois Savsanam, Eso Panchanamo, Sabha Bhava Pranashana, Manglanam Chisavisin, Paramam Om Shanti.
So, Jai Jain, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. It's exciting to get together again in our conversations. I see several folks additional also joined in. Sahil, welcome from Dubai, and Pallaviji's from Bhopal. Nishi Shah is there too. Great. Very good. And Rajat Mehta, welcome. Maybe just introduce yourself. We've had other people had a chance to introduce. So if you have a moment, you can unmute and introduce yourself.
Anybody who's new would be nice to hear from them briefly.
Yeah. And Hinal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Jai Jinendra, everybody. My name is Hinal Shah. I'm currently based in Abu Dhabi, just moved here a few months ago from the UK, spent the last 4 years between the UK and the US, where I was for business school and in the tech industry thereafter. Profession-wise, I work in the investment industry. And as far as my journey with Jainism is concerned, I've been on that sort of journey of learning more and understanding so I'm quite excited to learn more about sort of the way of life in particular. While in the UK, I was actively involved with Young Jains, was on the committee for a number of years, so excited to carry on this journey even while out here in the UAE.
Great to see you. And I see also Nishi Shah is there and Dhruv Mehta. Just a quick welcome and hello from you as well. If you just want to unmute and welcome, hello, everyone's had a chance to do some introductions. So maybe Dhruv Modi, sorry, Dhruv, if you'd like to introduce yourself also.
Jai Janendra, everyone. Dhruv Modi here from Mumbai, India. I couldn't maybe join the last couple of sessions because we were in Mandir, but happy to join the session today and learn.
Great.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to introduce themselves? Please unmute and welcome. So great. So today, Yogen Bhai, we want to do a conversation about something that takes us to the next step. And I want to make sure you can see my screen, but I want to begin with a conversation about our AAAs, which will become common vocabulary to everyone. But begin with this. Imagine if an alien lands in our backyard, right? And then और फिर अपन को देखना पड़ेगा कि अगर वो अपन से पूछते हैं कि who are you first, they will say, but then the conversation will get, what are your principles and what are your practices? So let me ask the group here to begin to think of that. And Yogen Bhai, put us into this mode of, we did a lot of philosophy discussion last time. And
we did a lot of philosophy. It was actually quite heavy duty dose of soul and karma and the exact mechanism and the whole model. And that serves as a very nice foundation.
Yeah.
But when we actually are looking for our daily practices, the principles and practices is where we spend 99% of our time.
Right.
We're not constantly thinking my soul this and my karma this as much. And in fact, it may not even be healthy to do that. We have to live in today's world. We have to live in the present world. And that's where our core principle, that's our core.
तो ठीक है, मैं अगर पूछूंगा, so Dr. Rajain, अपन अभी बातें कर रहे थे, अगर आपसे कोई पूछे कि आपकी, और this is someone completely alien, आपसे पूछे कि आपके principles और आपकी practices क्या हैं, तो आप किस तरह से reply करेंगे? What will be your thought process in answering that question? You'll have to unmute. Or someone else, if Dr. Rajain is not able to answer. Maybe Pallavi, would you like to take a stab at that question?
Okay, so I'm sorry if there's a lot of noise in the background.
No problem.
In the car. So, since an early age, a very big influence has been the daily prayer of Meri Bhavna. I actually have it up in my room every day in the morning when I wake up. So the simple things like the Meri Bhavna is everything about principles. Ki, gun grahan ka bhav rahe, drishti na doshon par jaye. Then every sentence, then you say that लाखों वर्षों तक जीऊं या मृत्यु आज ही आ जाए, तब भी न्याय न मार्ग से मेरा कभी न पडिगने पाए. Then सुख में होकर मग्न फूले, दुख में कभी न घबराए. Every line is a guide towards what happens to you. So even in terms of great adversity or there's tension in the office, my work is not, I'm having tensions, just reading it just puts your mind in the right framework on how to see a situation, how to deal with it.
Sure. So very much so, you have these practices of doing a prayer, which go to the underlying principles. Great. Other people's thoughts on आपके क्या principles हैं, आपकी क्या practices हैं. अगर आपसे कोई पूछे, Jain हो, कोई alien हो, आप किस तरह से reply करेंगे? So I know Dr. Soni is on as well. We're talking and getting into the depth of understanding our practices and principles. So if an alien comes and asks, what are your principles, practices? Others? Your thoughts on that? Or Sahil, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was, I'm thinking how I would do it to someone who knows nothing. And I would probably use the 3 A's.
Yeah.
And that's what I would share, because at least for me, that is a solid foundation from which to build upon.
Right. So now let me ask you this, Sahil. Do you know where the 3 A's came from? We haven't even talked about what the 3 A's are, but आपको मालूम है कहाँ से आए 3 A's? कहाँ से शुरू हुए concept? Actually, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So anyone else wants to make a comment before we begin on our journey to look at principles and practices? We agreed our common goal, just a quick review, our common goal is that upon moksha, equanimity, and day-to-day life mein apan ko happiness, because ultimately that is what we are looking for. And a way to achieve that is going to be through the 3 A's: ahimsa, anekantvad, and aparigraha. And all of this actually comes from Tattva Sutra. How does it come from Tattva Sutra? Is the following way. Can you see the screen? Yes? Jagan
Yeah.
bhai, you can see the screen. Okay.
Yes, yes.
तो अगर अपन तत्वा सूत्र के पहला चैप्टर के पहले देखते हैं, it is the following sentence and paragraph that made all the difference in the world. Ye Tattva Sutra. The central themes of Tattva Sutra are non-violence, non-absolutism, and non-possessiveness. Okay. तो अपन अपने जो पूरे कोर जैनिज्म है, वो नथमल टाटिया जी ने जो synopsis, he funneled it down. It is non-violence, non-absolutism, and non-possessiveness. Over the years, when we have read this and discussed it with many people, they talked about that for the modern age, that this was one of the key concepts that we need to be talking about. And why? Because non-violence strengthens the autonomy of life of every being. Non-absolutism strengthens the autonomy of thought of every individual. Non-possessive strengthens the interdependence of all the existence. If you feel that every soul is autonomous, you will never trample on its life to live. If you feel every person is thinking person, you will not trample on their thoughts. If you feel that everyone, that you own nothing and no one, you will not trample on the planet. In the 2nd century CE, through Jain philosophy monk Umaswati wrote Tattva Sutra. These principles was the only way to global peace. Today, this is even more the case. These are the only values that can save humanity from the deadly acts of war, economic exploitation, and environmental destruction.
So
That is the
Manoj,
first chapter, yes.
This is so relevant, as Dr. Natmal Tatia, who is the translator of this, wrote.
Yes.
In the old days, we all lived in our ancestors lived in a very small area, never traveled the world, never went too far. And so a lot of these issues didn't bubble up as much.
Right.
But now we are interacting with people of so many different faiths. We have so many other material objects. These core principles bubbling up is so much more relevant. And that's why the AAAs should be such an important and top of our core.
Exactly. So what, to put it into perspective, this is where Natmal Tatia ji saw where our scriptures were leading us to for modern day, right? So let us take a minute and then look at the depth of AAAs. But any questions or comments on this for a second here? And I want to share another slide which gives us the perspective, a broad perspective of how we got to the AAAs. अगर अपन को याद है कि अपन ने पिछली बार फिलॉसफी की बातें करी और फिर फिलॉसफी की बातें करी, उसके बाद में अपन ने बोला कि फिलॉसफी से प्रिंसिपल्स आते हैं और प्रिंसिपल्स, 3 कोर प्रिंसिपल्स, AAAs, और फिर उनसे प्रैक्टिसेस. आज अपन प्रिंसिपल्स के बारे में बातें करेंगे, फिर उसके बाद में अपन प्रैक्टिसेस के बारे में बातें करेंगे. And that is the idea path to happiness, equanimity, and moksha. So we'll just ask, if people can mute themselves. Yes. Okay. So now we see where the idea of AAA comes from. But there is one unifying concept. So Yogan Bhai, help us through this slide, which I think is so relevant to today's day and age. And this is what Natmal Tatia ji and Uma Swati ji saw in the early parts. उन्होंने ये देखा कि ये unifying principle है, value है. इस slide के बारे में आप बताइए.
So I think last week a match took place between
Hindi English. अपन Hindi English combine कर सकते हैं.
Last week एक match हुआ था पाकिस्तान और इंडिया के बीच में.
जी.
Okay. I heard India lost, but you know, such things happen. Anyway, so in लोगों को match देखना था. And you can see that the person who's in the wheelchair, right? If you just gave them the box like equally, that you want to give equal to everybody, that person would not be able to make use of the box. Equity means that's equality, right?
Yeah, that's
अपन कई बार
equality.
बोलते equality होना चाहिए, परंतु अपन को equity चाहिए, where fairness and justice, so all are equal, and we have to see their points of view as well.
Okay,
and
fair
now,
enough.
what Natmal Tatia said is now we need to think about equity, and that is the, if you look at AAA's, Ahimsa Anikavad Aparigraha, uske andar, each ke andar core foundation is equity is a core foundation. So for example, yadi apan, let's Manoj take an example of Ahimsa now. Let's take each of those and talk about equity.
ठीक है. So let us take, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So what then, if we take this principle of equity अपन लेते हैं, अहिंसा क्या है? अहिंसा बोलती ये है कि जो मेरी आत्मा है वैसी ही आत्मा जानवर में है और plants में है and other things. Most people don't believe in that idea, right? They think my soul is the only and pure and right soul, so forth. But Jainism says that the souls are equal. All life has right to live. That's where ahimsa comes in. Where does anekant comes in? Anekant कहाँ से आ रहा है? अनेकांत ये बोल रहा है कि अनेकांत की मेरा perspective जो है, the way I see the world is not the only and the right way to see the world. कि दूसरों के perspective को मैं अगर equal करूं, in not just equality but in equity, that I do fairness and justice to it as well there. और अपरिग्रही क्या बोल रहा है कि same idea, कि जो मेरी basic needs हैं, अगर मैं दूसरों की भी basic needs देखूं, अगर मैं उनको equally करूं, that is aparigraha. That all basic needs are met.
What's important is जो poor household में हो, जिसको education नहीं हो, उनकी needs different होगी than the needs of someone who's had a very lavish upbringing and very strong upbringing. And so equity means we need to be able to understand their perspective and be able to help them.
Absolutely. So I want to pause here, and this is a really important concept. मैं पूछूंगा कि what do you think of this idea? And again, Sahil, your thoughts on this, and Dr. Soni, your thoughts on this as well. Yeah, a concept and idea of ahimsa, nekantwad, aparigraha with the overlying value of equity and equality. What are your thoughts? Yeah, you're on mute, Sahil. You're on mute. Sorry.
If I may go first, so I'm a big believer of equity over equality, and I was actually practicing it very strongly for the first two A's that you mentioned on the slide, which is why I went vegan. And now, if someone disagrees, I'm curious rather than judge. I'm curious to understand how they see the world. But the one that I did not consider, and I was focusing on my non-possessiveness and removing things, material possessions. I love what this says, because what my basic needs might be are not necessarily the same basic needs for somebody else. And this was a real eye-opener for me. And I felt that there I was more on the equality perspective. And this slide has opened up my mind that in aparigraha also, which I was not considering, equity is much more important. So I love it. It's really opened my mind to that. So thank you.
Yeah, And the funniest thing is this came from Tattva Sutra idea concept with Uma Swati writing it 300 AD, right? Imagine that from Jain principles. So Dr. Soni, your thoughts on these ideas? You can unmute. You'll have to unmute. You'll have to unmute.
So basically in Jainism, when we talk about Jain principles, and when we are talking about moksha, so there are two things which every shastra says, and that is a vyavharnay and a nischanay.
Exactly.
Okay, now as Yogendra said, that suppose these three persons, they are watching a television show or a cricket match in a stadium. So you see to it that everybody could watch. See, now there is one concept in Jainism that is bandh. So the thing is that even in Jainism they say कि यदि आपने पुण्य का भी बंद किया है, तो जो उस बंद के कर्म के जो पार्टिकल्स अपने सोल से चिपक गए, वो उनको भी आपको हटा के मोक्ष जाना पड़ेगा.
Right. Positive karmas you have to lose, right?
हाँ. So when we are talking as in like, say suppose for Vyavharnay, day-to-day practice, this stands very well.
Exactly. So in fact, I will say this, you're perfectly right, and we should have classified that most of the conversations we're doing is Viharnay. We are doing it in the day-to-day life. Yeah, Viharnay versus the Nischanay. And that's an important concept distinction that they have made. And that at the end, at the Nischanay, that we are looking to eliminate both good and bad karmas to eliminate, to achieve moksha. So yes, very much so. But in day-to-day life, we're looking at ahimsa, anekantvad, and aparigraha as the common concepts. So let us go into a little more depth in each one of these, and would like to sort of talk about these in their genesis and evolution, and then to talk about the depth and what they mean in our day-to-day life. So,
hey Manoj,
yes.
Yeah, so are you saying here that ahimsa wasn't primarily came from Jainism? There were other propagators of that?
So actually, that another way of saying what I'd like to present on this slide is to look at the evolution. I think it's important to look at the historical evidence as well. And yes, we have our Jain perspective on it, and that is important. But agar apan dekhen to scriptures mein as well as historically, Jain dharma kya bolta hai, plus दूसरे धर्म भी क्या बोलते हैं अहिंसा के बारे में. तो जब अहिंसा का कॉन्सेप्ट बिल्कुल डिफरेंट नॉवल कॉन्सेप्ट कि आप किसी की दूसरों को आत्मा को इक्वली ट्रीट करो, वो श्रमण ट्रेडिशन. अपन जानते हैं कि पहले जब वेदास थे, there was lots of animal sacrifice and all that happened, and then that evolved, and then we know that it was Mahavir Bhagwan and Parashnath Bhagwan who brought ahimsa to a new level. And yes, Buddha also had it, and Ashoka had it in his kingdom. In the Western world, it was not really a concept. Pythagoras, yes, he was vegetarian. Jesus Christ talked about unconditional love, and then Da Vinci and others. And that made all the huge difference in Christianity and bringing nonviolence to a new level there. And then we saw Gandhiji and then Martin Luther King, again, a preacher who took Jesus Christ's words and then brought nonviolence. I share this with you just to say that ahimsa as an evolution has been there over time. It is important, again, also to look at what is happening to ahimsa as well, increasing and decreasing. Over time, ahimsa, actually, if you look at Yogan Bhai, tell us, is violence increasing in the world or decreasing? What do you think?
The media or newspapers or ये सब लोग अपन को बोलते हैं कि violence increase हो रहा है. They're constantly telling us कि violence increase हो रहा है. But data shows, and please, all of us remember, we are basing a lot of our discussion on obviously Jain scriptures, but also the current scientific research that has been done and the current knowledge that we have as well. Data. So data is showing that violence has decreased exponentially, right? And there were three reasons why violence was taking place: hunger, disease, and war.
Okay. So data is showing violence. पर अगर अपन देखें जो animal की deaths हो रही हैं, meat consumption क्या हो रहा है, अपन देख सकते हैं, it is skyrocketing. And so ahimsa at one end is increasing and at another end is decreasing. ठीक है. But अपन ahimsa के बारे में, again, in day-to-day life, how do we want to be thinking about ahimsa? Ahimsa is at one step not harming, another step it is helping. So not harming through our thoughts, speech, and action, which then leads to practices that we will be talking about. So अपन जो अहिंसा के बारे में बातें करते हैं वो दो तरह से देखना चाहिए, not harming and helping. So lots of times we use the phrase live and let live. Lots of times in the US हमने ये भी बोलने शुरू कर दिया, live and help live. That is what ahimsa is. So ahimsa, we can look at that. और अपना जैन धर्म ये भी बताता है कि ये root of the violence बहुत जरूरी है कि अपन को intention देखना पड़ते हैं. You look at the actual violence, that's okay. You can look at attempt, but look at intention. That is really important. And then to reduce violence further, अपन को life force. So अगर अपन plants को compare करें humans, right? So plants have lifespan, physical power, respirations, touch. They don't have the five senses and mind. Humans have that. And so we want to minimize our violence towards those who have greater life force. So this gives us an idea of the variety and the variance of violence. And our Jain Dharma also says that तीन चीजों के लिए अपन violence allowed or minimized करना चाहिए. It's a necessity. So one is violence in our daily activity, daily life में जो घर के काम में होती है, अपने occupation में काम में होती है, and self-defense. Yogen bhai, any thoughts on the principle of non-violence and the violence that we are there, and to have us better see this in a way?
No, this is so important that we classify occupation, daily activities, and self-defense. And by the way, this is for the Grahast people. And obviously it's a different set of rules for monks and nuns. But a topic for some other time is that defense of religion and defense of way of life. Jains have not been as proactive in the past historically. But it's not to be discussed now, but it's just something that we should be aware of that might call some of our weakness in our over practice of perhaps ahimsa in a very purist way.
Great. And I see that Sugar Uncle has also joined in. I will show the original equality equity slide at the end for Sugar Uncle to also see and comment on. But we know well the story of 6 hungry men in the mango tree. There are different, even in something as simple as a tree, different levels of violence, right? One can do a level of violence by chopping down the entire tree. One can do violence of cutting the branch off the tree. One can do by plucking the mango off the tree, or one can do violence just picking up the fruit that has fallen. Minimum amount of violence is the fruit that has fallen. And so in Jain Dharma, we can even stage that level. But when we look at it now, how it relates to me, the violence, we come to this one thought process is, where do our principles of day-to-day activity, vegetarianism, our principles of doing meditation, yoga, not smoking, how do they relate to ahimsa? So Yogen Bhai, take us through this idea and concept of violence to the self.
In this day and age, आजकल आप सब लोग aware हैं कि these things that are here are not to be indulged in, or to, you know, not smoking, too indulgent, right? Low stress. Only recently we know how much stress causes harm to the self. So in the past, in Jainism, the focus has been, I am the soul, I'm not the body. In fact, when I teach here, when we teach here Pathshala, we say, I am the soul and I'm the body also, because without these elements, we
in
will
day-to-day
not,
life, right?
in the day-to-day life, we will not have the strength and the mental capacity to move forward.
Exactly. So first and foremost, agar koi मुझसे पूछ रहा है कि what you should be not doing ahimsa towards, अपन को ahimsa towards the self. I don't want to be smoking alcohol or drugs because it hurts my mind and body. I want to eat well. I want to lower my stress. I want to do yoga meditation, and I want to do exercise. That is non-violence towards the self. But then it gets more broad. We want to do non-violence towards family and friends, forgiveness, empathy, caring. अपन दूसरों लोगों के साथ सर्विस, फ्रेंडशिप, सिक्योरिटी करना है. अपने first ahimsa towards self, फिर ahimsa अपनी family and friends, फिर even enemies, people जो आप you don't like. We have to have tolerance for them. We need to forgive them. अपन क्षमा मानी पे अपनी enemies को भी अपन क्षमा मांगते हैं. And then certainly towards animals, we want to be having care for them, and then for the environment. So that
Manoj,
is the idea of non-violence.
Manoj, go back
Yes.
to the slide. I think
Yes.
these circles of non-violence, circles of ahimsa, this representation is beautiful, and many people pehli baar dekh rahe honge aisa. And
So
it is so important for us to keep this in mind, and this is the true envelope of ahimsa.
Right. So we peel one by one.
One by one.
One by one, we need to realize that it doesn't matter that we may not be fully non-violent to the self. We're all work in progress. अपन धीरे-धीरे अपने आप को better बना रहे हैं, but we must realize that there are different levels and different stages and different entities.
So Manoj, the question comes up is, how do we traverse this? अपन कैसे change हो सकते हैं?
Great. How does one transform? देखो, अपन कई बार angry, गुस्सा रहते हैं, अपन we have hatred, we have deceit. I could put so many things here, but there is a process. जैन धर्म अपन को सिखाता है कि अपन वो anger को forgiveness कैसे जाते हैं. And it is self-awareness, अपनी आत्मा को जानो, self-reflection, अपने आप के बारे में क्या कर रहे हैं, apologizing, forgiveness, क्षमा, reconciliating, not holding grudge. That is the process that happens. Hatred, similar, self-reflection, and then realizing that you are criticizing not the person, but the actions, and overcome your own insecurities, and then see an other's perspective, anekantvad. That is how hatred goes to understanding. Deceit, similar, goes self-reflection, listen to others, change your attitude, your willingness to change and create a habit, goes to straightforwardness. And so, अपना धर्म बता रहा है कि किस तरह से अपन क्रोध को क्षमा में ला सकते हैं. Each of these steps, we just have to put the pieces together. अपन ने बहुत time spend करा ahimsa. Without doubt, ahimsa is probably the paramount principle of Jain Dharma. इसके बारे में और काफी बातें कर सकते हैं. मुझे अनेकांतवाद और अपरिग्रह के भी बारे में बातें करना है, but if there are any comments or questions, we can अपन उसके बारे में अहिंसा के बारे में कर सकते हैं, then we can go back. Any comments or questions?
I had
Tahir, please. Yes.
a couple of one comment and one question. So I love the circles because it shows that you have to focus on the self first.
Yes.
Before you're able to make a difference with family or people beyond that, animals, environment. So this was a very powerful image. My question is more around, the things on self that cause harm. Now, that you have many people, they consider it normal, but there are addictions. I find that when someone, for example, is I don't know, addicted to caffeine, they're having their coffee or tea, and if they're not able to have it, it's hurting the body. And so I want to address, I would love to hear your view on that, because that is something that is common with a lot of people.
Sure. So yes, addictions are in ways very similar to the addiction we have with smoking, some have with alcohol and drugs, because anything that controls our mind is, in meri jo understanding hai dharm se, it is not agreeable. So we were on vacation a couple of months ago, and we were walking by a cannabis shop. So यहाँ पे marijuana legal हो गया है America में कई जगह. So I was with my brother-in-law and we were having a conversation, and he asked me, क्या जैन धर्म में अपन marijuana ले सकते हैं या नहीं, smoking के लिए और इसके लिए ना है? तो मेरा response was, if it is affecting your mind, then it is not permitted. To what extent it affects your mind is variable. Obviously, cannabis or pot, as the common name, is affecting the mind significantly more than, say, caffeine from coffee or tea. So, yes.
To Sahil's question, that's one where it's decision by oneself about to partake in some of these or not. But also, genetically, some people are predisposed to either depression diseases or diseases of anxiety.
That's perfect.
And so on.
Yes, that's perfectly fine. और अगर वो उसका आंसर अगर मैं से पूछोगे तो मैं बोलूँगा कि कई बार अपने कर्म, according to Jainism, a karma is what puts us in a rich household or a poor household, with a disability or non-disability. So we can use that as a potential answer. Okay, I want to now go into deeper. Now this gets into really a level of depth, and I want to go into Anekantvad and how one can look at this. History of Anekantvad is actually very short and brief. It is only in the Jain tradition we could find historically कि Anekantvad के बारे में क्या है. And the parable of the elephant that we know well was only introduced recently. And then we know in day-to-day that is there. And it was codified, obviously, with the Tattva Sutra. And what is Anekantvad? It is really a continuum of perspectives. We will go into this more detail. There are perspectives. अपन दुनिया को अलग-अलग तरह से देख सकते हैं. अनेकांतवाद बोल रहा है अपन को. अपन absolutist view से यही है, बिल्कुल यही है, this is the way. Tolerant view हो सकता है, dialogue, बातें कर सकते हैं अपन, open-minded, and acceptance. We'll go into that there's more detail later, but I want to spend a little bit of time in the metaphysics. Now, this is a bit difficult, but I want you to just bear with me, put on your seatbelts, because this is an interesting conversation, the next 3 slides after this. If this is the self, ये अगर अपन ये हैं और ये दूसरे लोग हैं और अपने जो perspective है, दिशा है, अपने देखने का है, काला होता है is ordinary, अनेकांतवादी अपन होते हैं तो yellow, और अपन absolutist, fundamentalist जो होते हैं कि मेरा जो कहना है, जो मेरा सोच है वो बिल्कुल सही है, Well, that is there. And we're looking at another object. We're looking at some reality. Let us use these diagrams to look at what happens and how Anekantvad is beneficial to us. Okay, let us begin with an ordinary perspective. So Yogan Bhai, if I'm looking at a person who is not thinking very much about things, their ordinary perspective on an object, maybe a glass of water they're looking at. It's an ordinary. But
ordinary perspective, absolutely.
Ordinary. And these are other people who are also looking at that same glass of water, right? Now, what happens is there are two differing, varying views, and it is questionable what is the relationship of the self and the other in relation to this third perspective as well. So just to give you now the interaction that is happening, you have a self, you have a object, glass of water or something that one is looking at, you're looking at it, others are looking at it, and then there are multiple perspectives on it. So in an ordinary view, no, it doesn't matter. People are just looking at it and it's questionable that's there. ठीक है. Agar I have an absolute view towards that, nahin, this is a glass of water and it is half empty. That's it. No other way. That's only one way of doing it. I take an absolutist view. Others may also have an ordinary view, anekant view, an absolutist view. When one takes an absolutist view towards that object, it creates a conflict. This is what Anekantvad is telling us. You want to minimize the conflict between you and others. You want to minimize, and if you take a red absolutist view towards something, it will lead to disrespect, lack of dialogue, lack of tolerance, closed-mindedness, rejection, conflict, war, argument. This is what leads to argument. Take, for example, the war in Ukraine. What is it? The way Putin sees things, way Ukraine and America and other countries may see things. Absolutist view, other view, conflict arising, right? Sometimes we have an absolutist view of an object. That's where. अपना धर्म क्या बोल रहा है? धर्म ये अनेकांतवाद के बारे में, what is Jainism saying? It is saying the following. अगर मैं मेरा red view change करूं, अगर मैं अनेकांतवादी view लेऊं, और actually आपको मालूम होगा नहीं मालूम होगा, गांधी जी ने ये लिखा उनकी memoirs में. He said, and in his works, that he is an anekantavadi. He was taking in many perspectives a multiple perspective view on things. So self looking at a perspective is anekantavadi perspective. Others may be doing it in any way, but what happens is our relationship to others changes. And we have a respecting relationship, not a conflict, which leads to respect, dialogue, tolerance, open-mindedness, and acceptance, which is
and Gandhi would have resorted to violence if he did not take this view. Yeah.
So let us take a minute or two. I know this was, and I promise this is the heaviest depth detail that we get into, but I really wanted to share with you कि अनेकांतवाद का मतलब क्या होता है and उसको अपन day to day life में कैसे understand कर सकते हैं. Our perspective, others' perspective of an object.
Manoj, I wanted to add just a little bit of evolutionary perspective to this. Our brains are wired to make decisions about people and objects in matter of 0.3 seconds. Our brains are wired. We have to overcome that wiring and take the time to really understand other person's view, situational awareness, personality issues of other people, and then come to our conclusion and then come to our view. So it's really important that this is just not sort of the Jain view. We are wired for almost the hardline view.
Sure, evolutionary way, and it gives you. So any thoughts, comments on this, and then we'll talk about aparigraha. So we're doing the 3 A's, going into depth on the 3 principles, so the process of understanding those principles. Yes, go ahead, Sahil.
I have a comment. I love this, the way you've explained it. And one thing I would love to add is, apart from respecting, you may also learn something.
Yeah.
Your view, if it's not the absolute view, and we know that there are many viewpoints to many things, you can even learn something.
Absolutely.
One, you learn something new, and you also get to understand the other person better, because you see how they see the world, which could be very different from how you see the world. So I find that this is a way to really bring people closer together rather than to push them apart.
And I'll tell you, I practice this in so many conflicts. I'm in conflict situations. मैं जहाँ पे जैसे mayor के साथ कभी बातें करता हूँ, and we have different doctors who have varying views through the COVID crisis. I used this so many times to help me calm down and listen to others' perspectives and understand, especially when people were not taking the vaccine and all of those things. This concept was incredibly helpful in my day-to-day life, and that is why I want to bring this principles to light for so many others, especially the Jain community, क्योंकि अपने already treasure chest में ये चीज हैं. That is what is so important. कि अपन
Manoj, and also in modern work, progressive work areas, managers are being asked to practice to listen, respect other views, and integrate that, and that is shown to have an optimal outcome.
Actually, जो अपन last session होगा वो practices के ऊपर है, और अपन ये सब इन principles से क्या-क्या practices आती हैं उसके बारे में बातें करेंगे. I just show this slide. I won't tell the story. You all know the story of 6 blind men and the elephant. हर एक सोचता है कि जो वो touch कर रहा है, it is the right perspective. That is why we should not have an absolutist perspective. अपना तीसरा principle अपरिग्रह. अपरिग्रह क्या है? जैन धर्म की तरफ से अपरिग्रह is knowing the key difference. This is in day-to-day life, not monk life, knowing the difference between your needs and your wants. So for the grast, how should we be looking at aparigrah? For the grast, basic needs hoti hain, necessities hoti hain, comforts hoti hain, then there is wants, and then there is greed. There is a continuum, and there is a level of violence that is also done, and there is a relation to non-absolutism is there as well. So how does one understand aparigrah, and how does the level of this happen? It has to all do with attachments. It has to do with attachment. I'm going to use the same model and go into depth. What are we attached to? What are we attached? Think of this paperclip as an attachment. अपनी आत्मा क्या-क्या चीजों से attached है? First, अपन अपनी body से attached हैं. Now, I'm not making a judgment call. Judgment नहीं है. पर ये understanding होना चाहिए अपन को कि अपन किससे attach हो रहे हैं. और धीरे-धीरे अपन को detach कैसे होना है. We may be attached to our beauty, our age, our physical strength, our body. We are attached. We are attached to the minds, our emotions, अपने ego. सबसे बड़ा insult किसी को हो जाता है जब अपन उनको put down करते public में. It is that ego, because we are attached to our ego. Or anger, also love. That is where we are also attached to other people. Yes, no judgment of good or bad, family, friends, enemies, right? And we're attached to materials, food, clothing. So these are different levels of attachment. जैन धर्म बोल रहा है कि धीरे धीरे अपन ये सब चीजों से डिटैच करना पड़ेगा. And there are underlying to this principle are a number of practices.
Manoj,
Gagan
go
bhai,
back to the
yeah.
top. I just want to
Yes.
make sure that people see that detachment to these doesn't mean that we ignore, doesn't mean that we treat them like something really, really bad. We have to be mindful and aware of these things, and only then the process of detachment starts. So the mindfulness of our attachment,
yes,
is really important. I just wanted to make sure we understand that part.
और अपन ये हिंदी में जो word use करते हैं राग द्वेष, right?
Rag
It's राग द्वेष is what we're really talking about. ये पूरी slide राग द्वेष के बारे में है. अपन किस किस से कौन सी चीजों से राग द्वेष रखना है इसके बारे में है. Now let us come down to the practical. अपन क्या चीजें non-possessiveness in our daily life. Yogen bhai, this is from the Jain Way of Life book. Share with us.
So a lot of people अपन लोग सोचते हैं कि non-possessiveness अपरिग्रह बस money से है या इससे है, परंतु अपरिग्रह even idea से होता है. Even knowledge से होता है, like जिसका idea हो वो he's not letting go, और जो knowledge share नहीं कर रहा हो, और जो अपना time एक में बहुत spend करता हो, let's say doing some of their hobby but not taking care of the family, right? Or even death में letting go, or understanding that death is a natural part of life, or donation and wealth and so on. So there are many dimensions to non-possessiveness. These are only a few. So again, in our daily lives, being aware.
I'll tell you, during the pandemic, I was involved and put together an idea for testing in our city. That we weren't able to do COVID testing. And in time, I figured out from myself that I became really attached to the idea of the entire COVID testing plan we had done, pool testing, massive testing for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And I began to sort of think, this is my idea. That ego, that whole possessiveness even to that idea became a very powerful way of thinking. And I used Jain principles to detach. I said, this is not the way to be thinking, and actively doing those things. So that is what attachment is. Okay.
Yay, nice. We did three
core principles.
Three core principles
and,
in time.
And what we want to do is next week, we are then going to go into practices. Each practice की जो होगा, जैसे vegetarians, ये कहाँ से आती है, अहिंसा से आती है. We'll talk about it is where, and we'll talk about the day-to-day अपने life में किस तरह की practices such as intoxicant free. और हर practice में अपन ये elements बातें करेंगे. अपन उसका meaning क्या है, right? We'll better define वो practice. 24 practices हैं अपन ने जो बातें करेंगे. Scriptures में कहाँ से आती है, और उसके science and health benefits और business life professional benefits क्या हैं. आप देखेंगे अनेकांतवाद के कितने सारे day-to-day work and day-to-day life benefits हैं. Same thing, अपन अनेकांतवाद की different practices हैं, उनके बारे में बातें करेंगे. Equities, even scripture reading and open-mindedness, and the practice in aparigraha as well, and balancing needs and wants. And जो अपन उपवास कर रहे हैं, these are all practices that come from the 3 core Jain principles. So I want to take a minute and pause. And I know Leena ji is here as well, and want to also share some of the worksheets. But maybe we have a few minutes, we can talk and questions, and then I would like to do the worksheets as well. Comments, and then thoughts and further. Sugar Uncle, I know we haven't been able to share a lot at the beginning part, but if you have any thoughts on this. You have to unmute. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I really admire your presentation skills. The graphics and, you know, how you break it into components is superb. But, you know, it's a way of expressing. I have different perspective, of course, because I'm more a, you know,
Yeah.
doctrine type of person rather than, you know, actual practice. But overall, I think it's very good, though there are some points where, you know, one can make comments.
Sure.
For example, you know, you are silent on communication. Non-violent communication is one of the most important features that we have. How do we speak?
Yes.
So now, in Anekant, you know, the basic philosophy is not just saying ha 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 to everybody.
Yes.
अनेकांत का मतलब ये नहीं कि आप जो कह रहे हो ठीक है, ये भी कह रहे हो ठीक है, मैं भी कह रहा हूँ ठीक हूँ.
Yeah.
So, you know, there has to be some basis, convincing basis के क्यों है अनेकांत. जैसे एलिफेंट की बात है ये. एलिफेंट इज ए स्टैटिक एग्जांपल. क्योंकि ये तुम कह रहे हैं 10 स्पीसीज को ले लो तो वो आपकी ट्रूथ आ जाएगी.
Yeah.
So we have to be a little bit more, you know, इसका जो फाउंडेशन है ना, ये हमें थोड़ी सी क्लियर करनी चाहिए. और इसका जो बेसिस है, जैसे हम कहते हैं, जो बेसिस के लिए हम कहते हैं कि अनेकांत के 3 प्रिंसिपल्स हैं. एक तो रिलेटिविटी है कि योर व्यूज आर रिलेटिव टू योर नॉलेज एंड योर इंटेंशन. फिर दूसरा हम कहते हैं कि अपोजिट्स को एग्जिस्ट. कि हर चीज अच्छी भी है, बुरी भी है. तो इससे होता है कि हमारी जो दृष्टि है ना, वो अच्छाई के लिए जाती है, बुराई को देखने में जाती है. मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम हम बुराई को देखने में जाते हैं. और तीसरा ये होता है कि हम हर एक चीज में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को रिकंसिलिएशन में हम लाना चाहते हैं. अनेकांत जो कहता है ना, वो ये है कि वी वांट टू अवॉइड कॉन्फ्लिक्ट एंड डेवलप रिकंसिलिएशन. ये बट ये प्रिंसिपल है. और हम तो अंत में हम ये कहते हैं, इसका इजी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन है. हर चीज में आप देख लीजिए, 2 बातें हैं. एक तो कहता है ना, योर वे और द हाईवे. दैट इज एक्सम्पल. सो हम कहते हैं कि यू और मी हैज टू चेंज टू यू एंड मी. ये फाउंड. अब ना आपका थोड़ा सा मेरे को काफी differences लगते हैं. You know, the concept itself and how you practice, they are very different.
Yeah. So Uncle, we'll connect and harmonize on these, and then we may agree to disagree too.
Yes.
But yes, absolutely.
But that is exactly the reason we are presenting, and to share the views and to get others' views on the learnings that we have, and to you know, bring it up to broader scope of conversation. Oh, great. Other comments, and then I want to share a master general sheet. If you can see, we're asking, remember everyone, that we have done. This is just a chance to make sure that we don't just come on a call and talk. We participate in our self-reflection. So if you haven't had a chance to do this, please take a few minutes, write. Many people have already done this. Write 3 things that you're seeking. Do a self-reflection. You can do a small mini, takes about 5 minutes, and then go into seeking my happiness. Look at what you're seeking in happiness. Are you happy at the present time? And then look at the priorities. We will be talking about the basic practices and tell us and tell yourself what is a priority. It's a easy sheet. There is a very easy way to, if you just click on this, watch this video, it will walk you through how to do this as well. I want to pause with that. Any last comments and questions from folks? And then we will spend next time really interesting on the 24 practices, where they came from, where they come from the scriptures, and where they are in the scientific benefit for that. So I know Pallavi is there. Would you like to add any comment? And others, Dr. Jain is there as well. Yeah.
Thank you. This was a very good session. I really enjoyed it, but over to other people.
Okay. Yeah.
अनुज,
Anyone?
अनेकांतवाद जो है
जी,
उसको बहुत डीपली स्टडी करना जरूरी है। अनेकांतवाद जिसको हम बहुत सुपरफिशियली ऐसा मानते हैं कि आप भी ठीक हो, वो भी ठीक है, मैं भी ठीक, तो हम तीनों अगर ठीक हैं तो व्हाट इज द एब्सोल्यूट ट्रूथ? Who will tell?
But by the way, we never meant to imply that everybody is okay and all views are okay and so on. We didn't go into the second layer where we are, the Keval Gyanis may know the truth, and even for them, it changes over time and so on. So we didn't go to that level of discussion.
So Anikantwad to me also, Rajanji, is the following, that I may have a perspective and you may have a perspective. It tells me that I need to know your perspective, but I don't have to completely agree with your perspective, right? Anikantwad doesn't mean that I have to agree to that perspective completely. And I think that is important, that as well. So yes, and in 1 hour, it is hard to go into the depth जो scriptures में लिखा हुआ है, but ये door opener है. This is an opening of a door for conversation in a broader forum with our younger generation, with even non-Jain generation and others. So great.
So can I,
yes.
I'm just tempted to come in over here with a quick observation. So
yeah, please.
As an administrator, this whole concept of Anekantwad is really very useful to diffuse conflicts, to forge the way ahead, because every day, I would say, in every decision, I have to make or get others to make as a policymaker, is that there are conflicting views. There are so many ifs and buts in everything, in every programmatic intervention. And over here, it's really useful to see where the others' thoughts are coming from, and then try to find the middle ground. So this whole concept of not sticking to what I want to be done and also being able to stir other people towards a kind of a middle ground to forge a way ahead. I think it's also very useful as a very practical way of explaining things to yourself and moving ahead.
Exactly. And in corporate world as well, it is, I think, really important. And when it comes from our core philosophy, अगर अपने धर्म से आ रहा है, core philosophy से आ रहा है, core principle से आ रहा है, then we are able to use it to our benefit. And why not? Why not use things that will to our benefit in our professional life, in our personal life, and so forth? So when we talk about the practices next week, we will go into more of the details कि अनेकांतवाद से क्या-क्या practices आती हैं जो अपन अपना सकते हैं, जो अपन use कर सकते हैं. So ठीक है. We're well beyond our hour, 4 minutes. Yogan bhai, if you wouldn't mind, and अपन नमोकार मंच से अपना program, अपना session खत्म करते हैं, and then we'll meet everyone next week.
Wonderful. So hopefully during Paryushan, Daslakshan, you guys have had a chance to reflect about yourself and inner self. And hope plan is that we will keep that energy for throughout the year, right? And continue strengthening it. take a nice deep breath. Inhale, please. Hold. And very slowly exhale. With a smile on our face, let's do Namokra mantra together. Om Namo Ariyantanam. Om Namo
Sittanam.
Namo
Om Namo Ariyanam.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo Chayanam. Om Namo Lois Saunam. Eso Panchanamo Yaro. Sabba Bhava Panashno. Mangalanch Savisim. Armam Hoy Mangalam. Om Shanti Shanti. Jai Jain and everyone.
Have a great
Hope
week,
you have a
everybody.
Wonderful week. We will see you next week. Thank you so much. And we'll connect again.
Uttam Shama.
Uttam Shama to
Yes,
everyone.
Uttam Shama to
Yes,
everybody also.
Uttam Shama.
Please forgive us if we have hurt anybody through our discussions
Conversation.
and feedback.
Yes, Uttam Shama to everyone.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.